Countdown and go.
We're going live in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Hello, welcome to this week's episode of CXNext Live. Thank you for all of you joining us live during this episode, and thanks for those of you that are watching this recorded. For those of you that are new, this is a weekly series where we focus on areas around customer experience, helping you build a better strategy, helping you create better plans, and learning from real-world practitioners. We do this series every Wednesday. We record these so you can share them or watch them after the fact. Our episodes are typically around 45 minutes, and we like to bring in guests to join us to talk about their real-world experience around customer experience. Thanks so much for joining. I'm really excited about our topic for today. Before I jump into that, I just want to address a big topic in the news today is around the coronavirus. It's a big topic. We're planning our own CXNext event here in May. And there's some stuff we're doing at LogMeIn to help all of you out there. Just as a quick point of information, we have a emergency remote work kit that we are offering to people that focuses on helping you better collaborate, helping you disseminate information through things like webinars, helping you to build better access to your tools and technology, and then also helping you to support remote work. You can feel free to check that out. We'll put a link in it in a blog post related to this. But we know that companies are really struggling around how do they support remote organizations, remote work, reorganize their teams in an environment where many people are very nervous about the coronavirus. So we'll share some information that our CEO has put into a blog. We're also actively working on this around our CXNext event, where we're looking at the in-person event and then also how we can do things virtually to help support those that can't travel. But please keep a lookout for more information. And then we'll also be doing some additional follow-on blog posts around enabling remote work. Many of us in the contact center world, have large organizations, but also have remote workers that we support that are taking customer calls or engaging with customers. And so many of us either are very familiar with remote work or it's something that might be new to us. So we're going to be providing a lot of resources around how you enable your teams in this environment where you can still drive a lot of productivity, drive a great customer experience, but do it through a more remote work environment. So please look out for more information on that. So today's topic we're really excited digging into is really about how you deliver a more seamless digital engagement experience. Digital engagement is a big topic, and it's becoming more and more diverse. You look at things like channels that are new that we're enabling, like messaging channels or voice assistants, all the way through established and existing channels like maybe web chat or SMS text. As companies, really there's a challenge around looking at all these different ways we engage with our customers and creating a more seamless experience. What we often talk about in this series is that too often we look at that as a technology problem, and hey, it's just about deploying new technology or moving things to the cloud. When in reality, there's a number of factors that can lead to a more seamless customer experience. So we're going to dig into these topics and talk through 5 key areas. And we have a guest that'll be joining us, Mike Eastman. Mike is the Vice President of Contact Center Operations at Generate Life Sciences. Mike is currently in transit and getting to his final location and is running through some technical challenges of joining the broadcast, but he'll be joining us shortly and we'll talk more with Mike and get his insights around this area. But I want to set the table as Mike is joining us to talk through in a bit more detail really around how you can think about a seamless customer experience. Once again, it's not really a technology problem, but rather there's a broad number of aspects that can help to deliver a better and more seamless customer experience. Some of the things we're going to touch on today are talking about budget. So how should you look at budget and where should you be spending money? Whether that's technology spend, whether that's spend around your people, your organizations, training. So how do you start to validate and think about budget? The second is vendor overload. There's so many people out there that are saying, hey, we can make your customer experience better. We can make it more seamless. So how should you look at those vendors and build better processes for vetting them and validating them? The third is really thinking about resistance to digital initiatives. In many cases, new technology or digital transformation can seem scary, can seem daunting. So how do you remove that resistance and help your teams to move forward? The fourth is really around retraining and helping your agents for some of these new channels. In many cases, we've often invested in things like phone agent support and technology for phone calls and for the call center, but how do we start to think about broader training to help our agents and our frontline employees navigate these new channels and new digital engagements? And finally is how do we measure this and really highlight success? There's once again a common theme we talk about of building repeatability into our metrics, into showcasing success. And so that's another area that we're really trying to focus on is how do we build metrics around that? So we have these 5 different areas, and we're really going to try to dig into these 5 areas. Where I want to start off is to think about avoiding internal friction. This is the third point I brought up. And really why this is critically important is I think oftentimes change is hard. Change management is very hard. So we have to think about how do we help people feel as though, 1, the problem is worth solving, and 2, that their investment of time, energy, resources is really going to lead to a better future. And we spent a lot of time last week talking about this topic around building an overall strategy, and we had a great construct around this cathedral of customer engagement and customer experience. And I think one of the things that often gets missed early in the process, I think often we run right to the solution space or run to a budget discussion or run to a metrics discussion. But oftentimes one of the first things is really around everyone identifying what the problem is we're trying to solve and why this problem matters. By starting this early on in the discussion process, oftentimes you'll start to line up your stakeholders to say, yes, I agree, like we're all rallying around the same problem. We all agree it's a problem and here's why we think it's a problem. And I think this gets overused, but people talk about a burning platform. So here's the crucible or the platform we're going to put everybody on to say, yes, we all need to jump to something better. But what I think is important about that kind of construct is that by getting everybody aligned on there is a problem, we've identified the problem, we realize that the way we're doing things today does not work, it then gives you an opportunity to really define that future state. Here's where we want to get to. Now as a team, as an organization, let's work on that together on what are the right ways to fix that. Is it a technology problem? Is it a people problem with training or skill sets? Is it an organizational structural problem? Or is this something about our strategy? Maybe we've been focusing on the wrong things. And so I think getting that organizational buy-in to start is critically important to moving your organization forward. So I think for all of you out there, as you're starting to look at the world of customer experience and you're starting to think about, how do we build this seamless experience? Step 1 really is around getting your teams aligned on what is the problem you want to go solve together. I think from that, then we can start to talk about what are the downstream effects. So once there's agreement about what problem do we want to solve, now together, how do we go solve that problem? And then what are the metrics we want to do? What are the ways we need to enable our people? What's the budget associated with it? And then how do we pick the right solutions to go solve that problem? So step 1 in this journey is really around organizing your teams around the problem to be solved, the work to be done. So once you've done that, I think the next big thing that we'd want to go focus on is how do we want to measure success? So we've defined the current state. Here's where we are today. Here's the problem we're solving. Now, what does the future state look like? And in what ways do we want to measure it? In many cases, the current ways you're measuring, and we talked about this in quite a few recent episodes, is the current state of how you measure things is often not the way you want to measure the future state. So your current state may be measured around metrics from your classic call center, average handle time, or for contact resolution. But in your future state, in let's say, for example, a digital world where you're using messaging, first contact resolution may not actually be the best way to measure things. You may have an ongoing dialogue with that customer. So you may start a messaging interaction through something like WhatsApp, and that could be an ongoing thread. And you're not pushing your agent because they're working on multiple messages and multiple customers to try to end that conversation as quickly as possible or in the first conversation. So you start to have to think about different metrics to measure success in this new world. With, once again, trying to provide a seamless and consistent experience across all these different channels. You may start to look at also metrics around content and content curation. So you may say, hey, an important new metric for us is having consistent content across our channels. Whether that's content a bot may use and the answers it gives to a customer, or content that you're using for your phone agents versus your digital messaging agents. How an agent would want to respond to a customer via a chat, via messaging, is probably much shorter form, it's more concise, it's more pointed than maybe something that you'd be giving to a phone agent, which might be longer form and more article based. So you may want to think about metrics around content or about content curation or content updating. These are all things that in your current state of maybe where you're more phone centric or email centric may not be as critical to delivering a more seamless experience. So metrics become critically important to say, okay, here's where we are today. We all agreed on the problem. Here's where we want to go in the future, and here's what success looks like and how we're going to measure that success. And that becomes really critically important. So for all of you out there, as you're thinking about building these plans, our step one is let's identify the current problem. Let's be clear on that problem. Let's be deliberate, get agreement in our teams. They're going to go attack that problem. And then second, we're going to identify the future state and the metrics associated with that future state. What does that look like? Why does it matter? And so now we've kind of had this current state, future state defined. And this is in many of the conversations we have with the clients we work with, and in many of the subject matter experts we bring onto this weekly series. Once you start to really bring the well-defined this current state, future state, and the metrics you want in that future state, what do you want the world to look like? Then you can start to build all of those plans below it. So before I start talking about those plans and those layers, let me just do a quick station identification of what you're watching. For those of you just joining, or for those of you that are watching this recorded, this is CXNext Live. It's our weekly series focused on CX practitioners, building a strategy, building a playbook, and really learning from real-world success on the impact of a great customer experience. In this episode, we're talking about a seamless customer experience, and really what are the key pieces that go into that seamless customer experience. There's a couple different areas that we've been talking about. There's 5 different topics. We've been talking about how you build that strategy from what's the problem you're trying to solve, getting alignment on that to remove future resistance. Talking about what are the metrics you want in your future state, looking at things like how do you get budget approval, how do you think about training and the work you need to do to your agents, and then finally, how do you navigate the complexity of all those vendors out there. Our original goal was to have our guest, Mike Eastman, who's the Vice President of Contact Center Operations at Generate Life Sciences. Unfortunately, Mike seems to be having some technical difficulties, so we'll bring Mike back in, and we'll do another follow-on deep dive into many of these areas. Mike can also come back in and share some real-world examples, and we may do a couple short snippets, videos following this, so you can have Mike bring some of these examples to life. Without Mike here, though, I'm happy to continue to walk you through these key areas as you're thinking about your CX strategy. So we've been talking about really the importance of building a seamless customer experience and what does that mean and how you should approach it with your teams and organizations. We talked about step one is really critical around getting buy-in from your organization on the current state, the problem statement, really what is the thing you're trying to go attack and improve. And then defining the future state. So how do we want to break away from that status quo? What does the future state look like? And then what are the metrics we're going to use to measure success? So we're all aligned on where we are, where we're going, and how we're going to measure if we've gotten there. Because the road evolves, the journey is complex, and I think probably all of you can relate to that. As we look at kind of where we're going, some important aspects in building our overall project plan is one, certainly is budget. So this is an important thing that oftentimes can be a challenge in organizations. In many cases, broader budgets are not increasing. There's always pressure around operational efficiency, on reducing cost, on service levels. So I think anybody that's in the CX space always feels that balance of better customer experience, better results, but balancing that with an overall constraint in budget. So some important factors to think about as you're building out those metrics is how do we start to validate budget? What are the ways we're going to define success? And then how do we build an ROI model around that? Historically, much of the work in the customer service space has been around cost avoidance, cost reduction, while holding SLAs. And I think there certainly are still opportunities for that. But one important thing to think about in a conversation we often hear is how do you balance the cost avoidance or cost reduction with then the opportunity to spend elsewhere to deliver a better customer experience. So one example of this is you could invest in new technology that may reduce the volume to your contact center, to your live agents. So you may say, hey, we're going to invest in a dynamic FAQ page. that will reduce inbound volume, or we're going to invest in a chatbot, or we're going to invest in some new voice AI capabilities. And inherently that will reduce inbound volume. We'll get some deflection. Not that I always love that word, but we'll get some deflection to say, all right, now we have less volume coming into our contact center. So we now can say, okay, well, does this mean now we don't have to hire, we don't have to flex in our contact center? We don't have to maybe outsource as much things, or maybe we're outsourcing different type of work. Or we can change the mix of work that our agents are doing. But by reducing this inbound volume, it gives you an opportunity to now take a breath and say, okay, with our existing budget, now where do we want to spend incrementally? Do we want to spend incrementally in having our agents spend more time with customers? So we're going to not be as concerned about average handle time, but allow agents to spend more time so they can get to better know that customer. They can cross-sell. They can add a little more empathy into the discussion to improve our CSAT scores. So even though many times it can feel like a zero-sum game, at the end of the day, if we can start to tie the quality of the customer experience to our overall revenue, growth, the top line number, not just the bottom line number, there can be a great opportunity to take dollars we've saved elsewhere and spend them on these CX-focused initiatives. So even if you're in an environment where there is an opportunity to get more dollars, so we're not going to get incremental budget, we can also look at this as a way of where we're saving dollars to then invest those in areas of opportunity in this future state. And that can become a nice way to say, hey, if budgets are flat, we can still take incremental dollars and put them towards new initiatives that help us to deliver a better customer experience. And that can go into things like training, technology, ways to further enhance your employees. So there's a variety of ways you can look at that. I think secondarily, in an environment where you can look for incremental budget, then it's critical to tie it to those revenue generating, cross-sell, overall customer lifetime value. We're going to spend some time in a future session digging into customer lifetime value and the power of that metric. But I think what's critically important is you say, if we're going to build an ROI, if we're only looking at cost savings, we're driving the cost down to zero in the sense of we're only trying to save in what we're spending today. But if we can look at customer experience as something where we're building an ROI towards increasing the value of our customer, so we're selling them more, we're selling them other products, they're happier, they're more loyal, they're staying with us for a longer period of time. When we can attach these investment dollars towards those lifetime value dollars, that can become a great way to really drive an ROI and get buy-in from leadership on investing more in your contact center teams, your technology teams, your customer service teams, and also investing in CX more holistically. So I think as you're out there building your investment models, think about how you're laddering that up to, once again, growth and growth drivers in the company and the metrics associated with that, customer lifetime value, which, as I mentioned, we'll dig into in some upcoming episodes, and then finally, top line, driving growth, and growth in both your team and the skill sets they have, and also growth in your customer. Cross-sell, upsell, et cetera. And that can be measured in a lot of ways: basket size, conversion rates. There's a number of metrics, and that really comes down to your business. And certainly, please put comments in, and we can dig into those topics on a one-on-one basis in future episodes. So we talked about, rallying your teams around the current state, the problem you have, and agreement on that problem. We talked about the future state and the metrics you need around that future state and what that really means and how you should define them. Getting alignment on where we're going and what the world should look like once we get there. We've talked about budget and how you should look at budget and getting agreement on where and why you're going to be spending dollars, whether that's in a neutral environment where you're not getting more budget, or environment you have an opportunity to get more budget. And the third, I think, critical thing is really around once you're starting to get into this future state, how do you build training and capabilities for your teams? Oftentimes in a world of seamless customer experience, there's a lot of new ways we're engaging with our customers. So it could be that you have a frontline employee who's in a bank branch or at a hotel or in your retail store. You have your employees that are inside your contact center, in your customer service department, in your care organization. You may have sales organizations that are frontline reaching out. So they might be an agent that's focused on customer conversion. As we add new ways or create more consistent ways of engaging with our customers, so we're saying, hey, we want the experience to be really similar in the storefront, and in when they reach out to the contact center, whether that's through a messaging app or an email or a phone call. And we want our outbound conversations to be similar. Weaving that thread can be very hard when you have all those teams involved. They often report up through different organizations. They often use different knowledge bases. They're trained in different ways. So another important critical factor is, what are the new tools and training you need to put in place to make all those folks feel like they're empowered and enabled to do their best work? And so an important thing to consider and really focus on is that there's a lot of ways you need to think about that. You need to think about that both from a content perspective, from a training and onboarding perspective, from a follow-up of, how are we testing and validating that they're really understanding this new information or this new channel or this new way of engaging customers. So something we've really talked about is that, once again, content becomes critically important, that the content you're creating, let's say for a new digital channel, and the messages you're delivering there are consistent with what you'd be empowering your frontline employee with. So when someone goes into your hotel and they're talking to someone at the front desk, and they ask a question about your rewards program, that front desk employee is giving the same answer as your chatbot would be giving on your website. And so you should think about, how are you enabling and training those employees? So once again, they're all pulling from as consistent a source of truth as they can, in the way that suits their needs. So, an employee may not want to interact with a chatbot. They may or may not. But you're giving it in a way that they can consume it to help them be more effective in their job. And it's contextual based on their location, their type of work, the products they're supporting or servicing or selling. And so that also becomes really critically important, so that as you're moving from your current state to your future state, you're giving the tools and resources needed to help move those employees forward. I'm going to stop for a moment and just do a quick station ID for all of you that are out there. This is CXNext Live. We have a weekly live series on focusing on customer experience, how to build your strategy, real-world practitioner examples of success, and also helping you build out your specific playbook. So whether you're on your way to work, watching this on your commute, you're sitting back on the sofa enjoying this in the evening, or you're at your desk taking a little break, this is a weekly series where we really come out to all of you and focus on how you can deliver a better customer experience through real-world examples. In this week's episode, we're covering a seamless customer experience and talking about what are some key things you can focus on to deliver a better, more seamless customer experience. There were 5 topics we're focusing on, or 5 areas that you can focus on. The first is really around focusing on your current state and building consensus with your teams on what is the problem you want to solve and eliminating some of that internal resistance. The second is focusing on your future state. Where do you want everyone to go? And then how are you going to measure success? What are the metrics you're going to look at? So as we're moving from our current state to our future state, how are we making sure we're keeping everybody aligned on where we want to go and how we're going to measure success, so we know what success looks like when we get there? The third thing we focused on is, how do you build an ROI or a business plan around that? So you know where you are, you know where you want to go. How are you going to validate or vet the ROI or the spend to get yourself there? The fourth thing we talked about is, how are you going to enable your teams to make that journey? What new training, tools, resources do you need to help move them from the current state to the future state? Because there's going to be change and there's going to be new things they're going to have to understand how to do. And so we touched these 4 different areas. The final point we were going to touch on is really around vendor overload and all the different tools that are out there. And I think one challenge we all run into, there's some great MarTech diagrams of the MarTech 3000 and 5,000, and soon it'll be 10,000 vendors. There's more and more people that are out there that are trying to solve these problems of customer experience. And I think what becomes critically important for you out there is a few things to think about. One is certainly looking at your peers and what are they doing? How are they solving the problem today? And how quickly did they get there? Was this a year-long project, a 3-month project, a 6-month project? What was their path towards deploying new capabilities? And how did they vet success? So I think an important thing to do is, certainly join programs like this and listen to your peers on what was their path to success and how did they get there. And also not just around the technology and the vendor, but also what did it take for their organization to stand that up, and who was involved. And I think that becomes critically important. I think another thing is a bit of testing and learning, in the sense of when you're looking at vendors, be very specific on what is the problem they solve best, and is that really your problem? I think often the confusion becomes people talk about broad capabilities. They talk about, kind of everything under the sun that their problem is solving. We'll throw the kitchen sink at you. When in reality, having very tight alignment between your problem and being delivered on your problem and the future state and how that vendor solves that specific problem of where you are today and where you want to go into the future. And then the final thing I would say is looking at the success around what are the metrics that vendor talks about. What are the things they say that you should be looking at to measure success, and how do those metrics line up with your business? So once again, are they focused on metrics that maybe are the old way of doing things or versus metrics that are the new way of doing things? And looking at how those metrics align, how you're going to be measuring success. And then the final thing I think is then how, with their existing customer base, what's the feedback on their level of support through the process? Oftentimes vendors will be really supportive until up until you sign the PO. Then they're like, all right, good luck with onboarding, good luck with that. We'll be in touch at renewal time. And so I think another critically important thing as you hear from your peers is what is that onboarding experience going to look like? And you can do a lot of vetting around that in the discussion with those vendors. So give me a timeline from now until we're going to be live. What are the key steps? What do you need from us? What do and what's the information exchange that we should be looking at? So that can be another critically important thing in better understanding. Is this vendor the right partner for you? And is the complexity of the solution, the features of the solution, and success, is there alignment on that between that partner and your internal team and organization? And that becomes critically important as well. So we touched on quite a few things today during our session. We talked about really what does it take to build a really seamless customer experience, how you should approach it. We talked about 5 different areas of really having clarity around the current state, what's the problem you want to solve, getting internal alignment around that so you can help to eliminate future resistance of people fighting change, which change is always hard, transformation is always hard. So that's step 1 of really organizing yourselves around what's the problem you want to solve, then defining the future state and what are the metrics for success in that future state. So where do we want to go and how are we going to get agreement that we're all going to be there? And that's critically important. The third was talking about budgeting and ROI. So how do we build an ROI model to make sure we're setting ourselves up for success and that we're spending our money in the right way, whether it's on technology, on our people, on our process. The fourth area we talked about was really around how do we help our people along the way? So how do we do things like training and investing in our people? So as they're going through this transformation, as the change is happening, as they're dealing with new channels of engagement like messaging, or as they're dealing with change management, they feel empowered and feel excited and involved and invested in this change. And then the final area is really how do you kind of sort through the massive number of vendors that are in this space? And how do you help select those vendors in a more logical and clear way? Mike Eastman, the Vice President of Contact Center Operations at Generate Life Sciences, was hoping to join us, unfortunately couldn't. So we'll do some follow-on sessions with Mike with some deep dives and examples on some of these areas, and Mike can bring them further to life. And we'll post those so you can check out those in more detail as well. I want to thank all of you for joining for this session of CXNext Live. I know many of you in the conversations we have are really challenged with how do we build a more seamless experience. The world of customer engagement and customer experience is only becoming more complex. So hopefully this is a really good way to start approaching that and building your own strategy and plans for 2020 and beyond on delivering a more seamless experience. Please look out for additional information about our upcoming event in May, our CXNext event here in Boston. As I mentioned at the opening of the show, there are lots of big concerns around the coronavirus and travel. So we'll be looking at ways of creating virtual experiences around our in-person event. For all of you out there that join us each week on this session, but also feel free to register and attend here at the Boston. We will definitely have different options for those of you out there that can travel or cannot. And also stay tuned for our weekly series. We're excited about our next coming number of guests and really appreciate all of you that join us live and join us through the recorded episodes as well. So feel free to share this. We'll put a blog post up with just additional information, some resources from Mike, some blog posts around this topic in more detail, and also provide information about what we at LogMeIn are doing here to help support all of you, enabling remote work in response to the coronavirus. So I want to thank you all for joining. I'm sorry for some of the technical difficulties not having Mike here, but we'll definitely post more information. And thanks for joining our weekly series on CXNext Live. We look forward to seeing you next week, and thanks so much. Have a great day.